least one. Oh, we're live.
You hit the button.
Yeah, we're live. We're live and up going. There's just one thing I need to do before we start the episode. I got to turn my internet on to make sure I don't lose our YouTube audience. Now, what's up, teammates? Time for another episode of Teammate Talks podcast, our live discussions related around things like mental health, psychology, parenting, philosophy, character development, whatever you want me to talk about. Matter of fact, I would be absolutely ecstatic if you guys left us some comments of things involving those topics that you would like us to discuss or give our opinion on, or start a group about it, or whatever. I'm always out there for support. That's what this episode is kind of going to be about. So I told you guys last week that I wanted to do an episode kind of about checking on your quiet friends, especially this time of year. Look, I understand this time of year is synonymous with joy and happiness and all these other things. But if we're being realistic, for a lot of us, it's also synonymous with stress and mental health struggles and depression. Like, that is also common this time of year. It's something that I've struggled with a lot over my entire lifetime. And so make sure, if you have somebody in your life that has gone quiet or gone dark around the holidays or does that kind of thing, make sure to reach out and check on them. They're often when you see them, they're often the most, positive and happy looking people, but you don't know what kind of stress they're dealing with underneath. Because remember, a lot of people feel a lot of pressure around the holidays to create that wonderful experience for the people around them. And then that person feels all that pressure, becomes super stressed, might find themselves depressed, especially if they start focusing on family they've lost. I mean, I know my own father passed away almost 2 years ago now, and some things like that. And it can be a very stressful time of year for some people. So never be afraid to take some of your quiet friends under your wing and let them relax, and maybe take a load off of them by making sure that they have some moments where they get to have a good time, and you're the one that plans it and does the stressful part, so that they can also experience the joy of the holidays. Now, that's not completely what this video is going to be about, though, because I also understand that some of you might be exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you might struggle with becoming reserved and coming into yourself, or being super stressed or anxious or frustrated or depressed around the holidays, or maybe even just struggling with anhedonia, classic holiday stress. What's up, Luciana? It's glad to see you on here. I hope I said that right. Good to have the comments. And like I said, as always, please feel free to leave any topics you would like us to discuss in the future related to parenting, philosophy, psychology, character development, martial arts, anything along those lines, and I'm happy to have a discussion about it and give you guys my thoughts on it. So now that we've passed that point where I was talking about make sure you check on your quiet friends, because they may be dealing with a lot of mental health stuff and they may be very stressed out this time of year, I also want to talk about what you can do if you find yourself in that situation, right? And I know I talk about this kind of thing a lot, but this is how it relates to the title, because the thing to understand, I guess, is that perspective is a powerful choice. And it is a choice. It can be a difficult choice, and it takes practice to treat it as a choice, but perspective is powerful. The way you phrase things and the way you choose to look at them absolutely affects the way you feel about those things, right? So perspective is important. And when it comes to perspective, I really like what the old ancient Greek philosophy of Stoicism had to say on the subject of perspective, and how to train your brain to see things differently. And I'll get into that a little more in depth as we go, but let me check my notes, make sure I didn't forget anything there. Yeah, check on your quiet friends, stressed, all of that. So now let's get down to talking about what I just mentioned, right? And what relates to the title, which I don't remember our title now, but what do you choose, or what do you choose to see? So fact of the matter is a lot of people oversimplify the world, and that can cause a lot of stress and a lot of hardship and a lot of crap. What I mean by that is a lot of people choose to see the world completely in duality, and that's an oversimplification in my mind. They want to see things as good or bad, or they want to see things as black or white, or they want to see things as this or that, right? That's what I call duality. But existence and reality is not like that. It can be a little chaotic, and there are a lot of gray areas and nuances to reality and to life. So I want to focus on that a little bit. And like I said, I really like the approach that the ancient Stoic philosophy based their stuff on. But first, I want to bring up, a lot of people get bristled at the term philosophy, but I want to bring up that it's actually built out of two Greek words and translates to the concept of love of knowledge or love of wisdom. So what philosophy actually is a method of training your brain to think differently, to change your perspective. Now, the way the Stoics approach this is a big topic, and I've only got like 20 minutes to talk, so I'm going to kind of condense this down and probably oversimplify it a little bit. But for example, I've had to deal with a lot of funerals lately, so let me talk on the concept of death, right? Because I think death kind of symbolizes the epitome of the concept of facing your fears, right? Because I think that's probably the most common thing that people have fear or anxiety responses related to. And the thing that one of my favorite quotes from, I believe it was Epictetus, I'm probably saying that name wrong, was, why should I fear what is inevitable? Where am I going to hide? Right? And I like that quote. Why should you fear what is inevitable? Where are you going to hide? Right? And so the way that they approach this is that you've got to train your brain away from seeing obstacles as annoyances or frustrations and towards seeing obstacles as challenges, which is also a big part of the philosophy we teach in our martial arts studio, learning to see challenges as something fun, even if it means like gamifying it a little bit. But it also means you've got to kind of get away from that duality, that concept of everything being duality, right? So one of the ways the Stoic philosophy approaches this is they try to get you to reframe things away from using the words good and bad. Or as another quote from a famous ancient Stoic kind of goes, is that people are not good nor evil, but sometimes people are misguided and occasionally do truly awful things. Doesn't make them necessarily evil per se, makes them misguided. Right? And in this way, it was their way of combating that duality of the way a lot of people viewed the world. And so if you want to change your perspective, you have to change the way you talk about it. You have to change the words you use that'll help you reframe your mind. So for them, they wouldn't use the terms good and bad. They would use the term indifferent, and they had preferred indifferent or unpreferred indifferent, as in the only thing, the base of the Stoic philosophy was that the most important thing in life was to live as a virtuous person. As in, to find out the things that you saw as the most important virtues in a person, and that you carefully and considerately and mindfully make your decisions in your life with that being the most important compass, is the virtue, your virtues and the things that you find important. For me, that's compassion, empathy, patience, and I went blank on integrity. Thank you. Those are my main ones, right? And secondarily, they tend to track things as like health and wealth and education and things like that as secondary. So health, wealth, education, those are things that would be listed to them as preferred indifferent, as in they're external sort of things to be indifferent to, but you would prefer to have those things in your benefit. And then other things that you might consider bad, they chose to look at, like maybe poverty, they chose to look at as unpreferred indifferent. As in, it doesn't matter where you're at in your life. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or if you're this or that. You can still live a virtuous life. You can still choose to see the world in a relatively positive but realistic light, and you can still choose to try to be something positive, whether you're broke and homeless or you're rich. Everybody has the same ability to choose whether to move towards being virtuous or move towards being selfish or move towards any number of things. Because like I said, the world is not this or that. There's actually a lot of, the world exists in 4D space, right? So like there's a lot of different things, which is why I always tell people, because I have a lot of students come in here and they try to put me into some sort of box as to where my ideology comes from or what I think on different topics. And the fact of the matter is if you try to put my personality into one box, you're going to fail, because I go into like 8 boxes, you know, like I have a lot of well, I like this, and then I also like this, and then I do this, right? And I think all of us are that way. If we're really honest with ourselves, it's not all about one thing or another. So if you're one of those people that struggles this time of year, you're dealing with depression, anxiety, and all that, I am not going to sit here and tell you to cheer up, because that doesn't work, right? But what can work is trying to reframe your perspective around it by, instead of seeing things as good and bad, try to begin to see them as something you're separated from, so you can be more indifferent about it, and just think of it as preferred or not preferred, right? So, oh, sorry, I thought she was going to say something. So a way to shift your perspective, I'm going to give you guys an example. I think anecdotes are a great way to go about this. So I already mentioned death, which I think is one of those things that a lot of old-timey philosophers used to view as sort of a test. Like a big test of your philosophy is how you feel about the concept of death. Not what you think about it, literally how you feel about it. Because it's one thing to think something about it, it's a different thing to feel something about it, right? And so let me use an example about being in hospice, okay? So for example, let's say that you find yourself in hospice care with hours or days to live. Now, the example I'm going to give you here is meant to show how there is always a bad side to good things, and there's always a good side to bad things. And so let me explain. So you're in hospice care, you have hours or days to live, and a bunch of people show up to visit you. Well, what's the good side of that? The good side of that is, oh, look at these lives I've impacted, look at all these people that care about me. There's a bad side too. What's the bad side? Well, now I have to see the pain and the sorrow and the sadness on all my loved ones' faces, and that hurts me emotionally. So there's good and bad to that. Now, same hospice care, let's say nobody shows up to visit you. Well, that might feel bad in some ways. It might feel like a bad thing, like, you know, oh, I didn't impact people's lives, nobody cares, nobody loves me, that sort of thing. But there's a positive side to it too, because you could look at it as, oh, all the people in my life are strong and capable individuals that are not too worried or concerned because they know that I have a positive outlook on death, and they know that I am not struggling with this, and so they don't feel the need to come and support me because they know I'm handling it. So that becomes a good side to the bad. Does that make sense? And that's why the Stoics like to list things as preferred or unpreferred, but mostly indifferent. And another base of the Stoic philosophy, and something I teach in my classes all the time, is you have to understand what is in your control and what is not. So if you're stressed out around the holidays and stuff, it's usually because you're trying to control too much. You're trying to control what happens with everybody. You're trying to control how everybody has a good time, and that everything is a positive influence, and that everything is happy and everything is this. But what you need to understand is much of that stuff is out of your control. The only thing you can control is your words, your actions, your responses, your reactions. You might see a trend here. The only thing you can control is you. That's it. The only thing you control is you. The best you can do outside of you is hope to influence somebody else. But you cannot control how they take what you say, or how they take how you try to influence them. You can't control that. The only thing you can control is learning. And this was a big part of the Stoic philosophy, is the study of physics and psychology and biology, because they believed that you couldn't truly do your best in life unless you understood how the world worked to the best of your ability, which is why I love learning about psychology, particularly related to influence and things along those lines, because when you understand those concepts and how they work, you have a better opportunity to persuade or influence somebody in what you might see as a positive or preferred way, right? So if you find yourself being one of those people ultra stressed and get in and kind of anxious or depressed or whatever around the holidays, and you just need some alone time, then take it. Take that alone time, but do something with it. What I mean by do something with it is not sit there and read a book or maybe read a book, but watch TV or whatever. What I'm talking about is take time to sit and analyze why you feel the way you feel. This was another big part of Stoic practice, was that anytime you experience an emotion, especially one you might see of as an unpreferred emotion, no one likes to be sad, right? That it's important to take some time to let yourself feel the emotion and then try to separate yourself from it and become indifferent to the emotion. Once you become indifferent to the emotion, you can then use logic and reason to ask yourself, what is it about my situation that is causing this emotion? that is causing me to feel this way? What about the way I'm perceiving my situation is causing me to feel this way? And then that allows you to take a step back and reframe the situation to yourself. It doesn't change the situation, but you can reword it and reframe it from a different perspective, a different point of view, and that can help you over time with practice and training. That can help you overcome, I don't want to say overcome, but it can help you come to terms with what you might feel as unpreferred emotions. Depression and sadness and anxiety and stuff like that. But it does take time and practice. And you first have to identify and admit you have the emotion. Second, you have to separate yourself from the emotion. Third, you have to ask yourself what exactly about your situation is bringing this emotion up. And then fourth, reframe that situation into something more bearable or something more positive in the same way I did with my hospice example a minute ago, right? It's possible to reframe all kinds. Do you want to be on the podcast?
No, please do that.
You can come on out here and say something.
Please do that. Come on, Katie. Thank you.
Sorry, I was being asked a question. I'm trying to spit out what I'm saying. Anyway, I don't have a whole lot more time, but I want to kind of recoup a little bit. First up, check on your friends that have become quiet and reserved lately, right? Check on them because they might be having a hard time. Try to be supportive for them and stuff like that, because a lot of people are out here giving their all and sacrificing their mental health and emotional state to make sure that they give a positive experience to their family, their kids, and their friends, right? So if you know somebody like that, make sure that you reach out to them and try to offer them the same experience they're offering others. Be kind to each other is what I'm saying. If you are one of those people that goes through that kind of thing, then there's a lot of advice I could give you that could help, but my biggest piece of advice would be first, understand what's in your control and what's not. An action that I take is in my control. The effect of the action I take on somebody else, not in my control. Do you see how that separates things? Because too many of us get stressed out because we do or say something in the hopes of a certain type of response. And then when we don't get that response or that outcome, we feel like a failure. But in all reality, all you can control is what you put in. You can't control the outcome per se. You can give yourself a higher chance of success by having more knowledge on the subject. But once you learn to distinguish between what you can control and the parts of it that are a little outside of your control, you can begin to see things differently. You can begin to change your perspective. And honestly, there's a book that recently hit the top bestseller list. It's called Let That S Word Go. I think that's the title of it. Let That S Word Go. It's a pretty popular book right now. And it's based in this. The whole point is learning how to focus on the things you can control, and the things that happen that you can't control, you got to just let that go. Maybe try to learn from it, try to be better next time. But there is, as the Stoics would say, there is no point in dwelling or stressing or worrying about something that you cannot change and that is inevitable. There's no, they consider that a waste of precious time, a waste of precious life, to waste time worrying about something that you can't do anything about. Unless you can do something about it, in which case you should, right? They were a pretty positive philosophy in that way. And so, like I said, starts with what you control, what you can't. It goes a step further with when you feel yourself stressed, when you feel yourself sad, when you feel yourself depressed, sit down and feel the emotion and put it into words. Describe the emotion so that you can be exactly sure of what emotion you're dealing with, because sometimes anxiety can mask itself as fear because they're very similar to each other, but they are a little bit different. Sometimes depression can mask itself as sadness. Sometimes sadness can mask itself as depression. You want to be specific about what it is you're feeling. Then separate your mind. You're going to feel the feeling. I'm not saying suppress the feeling. What I'm saying is feel the feeling, but separate your logical mind from it and begin to explore what about what's going on is causing this feeling to pop up in you. And then once you're able to be honest with yourself and identify that, by the way, guys, I'm describing meditative practice. This is a form of meditative practice. Then once you can do that, start to try to reframe the way you see it. So another example of that is one of my favorite stories from a different philosophy. I can't remember which one it was, but some guy was on a rickety boat going across one of the seas in the Middle East around the Greek Roman empires, right? And a massive storm hits. And this guy, he writes about it later. That's how we know this story. And this guy is terrified, like absolutely terrified. Everybody on the boat thinks they're going to die. Everybody's holding on for dear life as part of this storm. And the guy who writes about the story says that, he was scared. And then in the moment, he had an epiphany and realized, does my fear help me survive this situation? And you know what his answer to himself was? Nope. My fear does not help me survive this storm. And then he asked himself, why am I afraid? And he realized, I'm afraid because I think I'm going to die, but I have not died yet. Therefore, why should I be afraid of this? It has not happened. And then according to another written witness account from someone else that was on the boat, this man started laughing maniacally. Even went up to the mast of the ship and started like climbing and hanging on the mast in the middle of this super crazy storm and just having fun. When he wrote about it later, he said in that moment, when he was able to realize that what was the base of his fear is that he thought he was going to die, and then the realization that he had no control over whether he died or not, and then the realization of, well, I'm not dead yet, so that doesn't mean I will die, he was able to reframe his perception around the situation from being a terrifying situation to being like you would treat a roller coaster, an exciting situation, even fun, right? And he ended up surviving. Nobody died in that storm. And there's several eyewitness accounts from that ended up in books and writings later, and that's why we have them. This would have been circa, I believe, between 300 and 400 BC, would have been around the time that this happened. And that's a great example of what I'm talking about analyzing your emotions, separating your logical brain from them, asking yourself why you feel those emotions, understanding what you can control and what you can't, and then realizing that your energy is better spent choosing a different way of looking at it. Now, that said, I need to put a disclaimer here because I tried to put these things into practice for a lot of years, probably 2 decades now. And for my first decade, it helped a lot, but I found that I couldn't do it a lot of the time. I could do it sometimes on smaller things, but I had trouble doing it on bigger things. And that's normal. And so I thought maybe it was my own failings in this practice. But it turns out after I finally sought out proper mental health care, I don't mean your GP doctor. Your general practitioner is not trained in mental health care. You need to understand that. So when you go and talk about mental health care to a general practitioner, that's not their specialty. In my opinion, GP doctors should not be allowed to prescribe mental health meds. I think you should have to go to a psychiatrist for that. But too many people go to their GP and go, well, I find myself anxious all the time, and they get put on anxiety meds. That's what happened to me. But then the anxiety meds turned me into a stinking zombie. So I went back and I was like, well, but I also struggle with depression. So they put me on depression meds, and those meds made me what you would call manic, right? Like super, it wasn't healthy. And I would try all these different meds until I went, this is a wild roller coaster. I need off. And I quit the meds because my life roller coaster was not as bad as the medication roller coaster. It wasn't until I finally sought out a true mental health professional that I was diagnosed with a few different things, but the main one being bipolar disorder. And the thing about bipolar disorder is it's partially genetic, partially a trauma response, but it is one of a few mental health disorders that cannot be fixed through therapy alone, cannot be fixed through perspective alone or coping skills alone. You need to be medicated, especially if you have severe bipolar disorder, which I do. I had rapid cycling, severe bipolar disorder. So, but the second I got medicated, all of those skills that I thought I was failing at, that I'm talking about how to change your perspective and your outlook on things, suddenly became much easier. So if you try to practice these things, it's not easy. But if you find they don't help at all, it wouldn't hurt to just go see a psychiatrist or two and just talk to them. Just do a consult, right? It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. And it could change your life for the better, right? I know it did mine. So I'm hoping you guys have a wonderful holiday. I'm hoping that any of y'all that listen to this aren't the super stressed, trying to make everything great for other people, but feeling super sad and depressed inside yourself. But if you are, I want you to know one thing. You can try this advice, but even more so, reach out to me. Direct message me. Look up my personal page. I'm on my business page right now. Look up my personal pages on social media, right? If you know my name, Corey Rose. Look up my personal pages. Reach out to me. I pride myself on living my life in the way the Stoics did, about prizing virtuous action, or what I see as virtuous action, above all else. So morals, above all else. That's why we teach a character development process in here, because all the character traits we talk about in here, discipline, compassion, integrity, perseverance, all of them, including focus, are also can be used as coping skills, and all of them are virtues, right? Now, we don't tell any of our students what virtues to believe in. What we do is we teach a little bit about a lot of virtues and then ask a lot of questions so our students can decide what virtues they find are most important to them. So that once you establish that and you understand what virtues are most important to you, you can begin to make decisions every day in your life to live by those virtues that you find important. And that, to me, is living a good life. You know what I mean? Finding the virtues that are important, because not the external things, not the wealth building, even the influence, right? That comes through virtue. Find the virtues that you think are important and then start making decisions to live by them. And because of the virtues that I strive for and the type of person that, look, it's not about the type of person I want to be seen as. It's about the type of person I want to be, about the type of person that I look up to, that I respect, that I want to model myself after, if you will. And I never do this again with real people. I do it with, made up people in my head. But because of that, guys, I am big on being supportive and encouraging to others. And if you reach out to me and you just need to rant and have a listening ear, I'm good. If you reach out to me and you're looking for guidance or advice, I may not have any answers for you, but I'll certainly do my best and be honest with you about how I see it. If you just need to be distracted from your stress of the day, reach out to me for that too. Guys, I don't really have many friends. I mean, almost none. I consider most of my staff friends. And I consider there's like a couple of other people outside of that. But guys, I don't have a huge social life. So if you need to reach out to somebody to have some support, especially someone separated from your situation and someone who values discretion, I value discretion. You can talk to me and you can know that nothing you say to me, your confidence will not be broken. I will not take that and go talk to anybody else about it. It's between me and you, right? I don't do that. I value discretion. I'm also pride myself on trying not to judge people. I started off life as a homeless 16-year-old. That's how my adult life started. I was a bullied and picked on kid. I know what bullying is really like. We like to say that getting pushed or called stupid is bullying. Trust me, kids are way worse than that. And they say way worse things. So even if you're a teenager and you're getting picked on and you want advice on how to handle it, reach out to me. You can tell me exactly what they say about you and I will help you come up with responses and ways to deal with it. You don't have to soften your language with me. You can tell me exactly the way it is, because I prefer to see reality for what it is and not sugarcoat it and not, put a veil over my eyes and pretend that bad things don't exist. Because I was homeless and I experienced a lot of very terrible things in my life, from sexual abuse to all kinds of things from my childhood on. And I know how bad the world can get. You don't have to hide that from me. Okay. So if you need somebody to talk to and you don't have anybody else, I'm here. Right. And I'm not asking you, I'm not saying you have to trust me, but I can promise you that whatever you say to me stays between us, unless you're a threat to others. That'd be because I have to say something if you're a threat to somebody, right? But outside of that, I don't care what language you use. I don't care whatever. I'll be there for you. And I highly suggest that if compassion is something that you value, that you do the same for the others in your life as much as you can possibly do. But if you're a person that does this all the time for other people, don't forget to take time to do it for yourself. And if you know someone that's always doing this for other people, do it for them, just every once in a while, right? So until we see you guys again, be the best teammates you can be the best at being you.